Okay friends, let's get started on our job. Firstly, you want to make sure that the radiator is cool to the touch. You don't want to open it when it's hot. Also, make sure you're wearing hand and eye protection. We're going to press this down, turn it counterclockwise, and remove it away from our face. Take a peek at that radiator cap, make sure it's still in reusable condition. I'll go ahead and wipe this down and set it aside. Now let's make our way underneath the vehicle. We're going to be looking for the drain. If you were to look above this shield, you can find the white petcock right there. That's the drain for the cooling system. To gain access to that, we're going to go ahead and get the shield right out of the way. Along each side of this shield, you're going to find two 10mm headed bolts. Remove the pair. Now along with those bolts, you're going to find that you have push clips in between the mounting bolts. We're going to pause on removing those and move along to our three 8mm headed mounting bolts across the front. Now I'll use a trim tool, carefully get in between this area and separate it. At this point, we can carefully start pulling this down, and let's remove it from the vehicle. The next thing we're going to do is start draining the cooling system. If you were to turn this counterclockwise, it's going to allow coolant to come out of this area right here. Now when coolant comes down, you're going to want to make sure you have a collection bucket under it, and keep in mind that it might splash. Watch your eyes. To help prevent any splashing, I'll just put a hose on here. I'll use a 19mm to loosen this petcock. Let that fully drain. Now once it's done draining, let's continue by closing the petcock. Now from right up on top of the engine, we're going to go ahead and remove this cover. You're going to find three 7mm headed bolts. Now we can start getting the air intake hose out of the way. To remove this, let's continue over at our 8mm headed clamp. You can also use a flathead for this. We're only going to loosen it far enough that we can grab onto this and carefully remove it from the throttle body. Once that's off of there, you also want to make sure you separate this hose. It should just pop right out of there fairly easily. Now we're going to move along to the mass airflow sensor wiring. To remove this, I'm going to squeeze on the tab right in the center, and then I'll pull this off. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, you need to take a peek. If you see any funny colors, it's probably corrosion. Now there's one mounting harness for this that attaches right along the side here. We'll just go ahead and grab onto that and pull it up and out of the air inlet hose. Set that aside someplace where you can easily find it. Now we're going to move along to the upper clamshell for the air filter housing. Along the inboard aspect, you're going to find two clips. I'll just reach under, grab onto it, slide it, and dislodge it. Now we can carefully grab onto this. We'll lift it up and out of the way. Underneath that, you're going to find your air filter. It's a good idea to go ahead and pull that out of the box and give it a close inspection. After that, I'm going to set it aside so no dirt or debris makes its way on top of the air filter. The next thing I like to do is move along to removing the 2 bolts that hold our fan shroud housing to the radiator. I'll just leave that in there a couple threads for this second. It's common for this to be in the way right here. If that's the case, just go ahead and grab onto the hose, give it a little wiggle, and pull it off of the radiator. We'll set this aside. All right, so let's move along the driver's side of the radiator here. You're going to find 2 steel lines that go into it with some fittings. Use a 16mm wrench to loosen and remove these. Keep in mind, they may have fluid inside of them. Make sure you have a collection bucket under the area. Now for this last one, I'll just reach down in here. Want to be very careful not to damage the radiator, and I'll grab that one down lower. Now we're going to make our way back into the vehicle. Keep in mind there may be dripping fluids under this area. Be as safe as possible. We'll come along the passenger side. We're going to be looking for these 2 metal lines. They have a plastic clip that goes directly into the radiator. Grab that clip by the 2 ears with some long nose pliers, give it a squeeze, slide it forward. Once that's dislodged, make your way over to the driver's side of the radiator. Over on the driver's side, we're going to continue on with some pliers. I'll squeeze on this clamp right here, slide it out of the way, and I'm going to try to remove the lower radiator hose from the radiator. It's common for coolant to still be lodged in the hose. Make sure you have your collection bucket under the area. Now back up top, we're going to continue on to the upper radiator hose. You know what to do, squeeze the clamp, slide it out of the way, remove the hose from the radiator. All right, so we almost have the radiator out of here. Last couple things we have to do is remove our mounting bolts from up along the top. You're going to find 2 10mm headed bolts. Do the same on the driver's side. Now before we pull it up and out of here, let's go ahead and grab this. I'm going to come in between it and the radiator, gently pry and pop out the locking tab. There's 2 more down the line. Let's grab that radiator. We're going to give it a little wiggle and lift it up and out of the vehicle. There it is, friends. Okay, friends, now it's time to prepare our brand new radiator. Let's start with these metallic clips. Looking along each side of the radiator, you're going to find the area that it needs to go onto. It slides on very simply. The only thing you really need to pay attention to is this area where my index finger is. That area needs to protrude towards the radiator. Slide it right in here, clip it in. There we are. You want to make sure that's nice and secure. I'll do the exact same thing on the other side of the radiator. There we are. Now we're going to continue on to our mounting bushings and our mounting bushing adapters. Let's take the rubber bushing and we're going to slide it in position. Looking at the bushing itself, you can see it has a groove for the radiator to slide around. Let's slide this right in here. Once you have it in position, go ahead and slide this in as well. At this point, you would do the exact same thing on the other side of the radiator. Now let's look inside each of the adapters that has the area for the lines that lead into the radiator. You want to pay attention deep down inside there. There should be a black O-ring. Make sure it's in there and it's sitting up against the very bottom. Check both. Make sure it's down in there. Perfect. Before we put the radiator back inside the vehicle, let's pay attention to along the front where the radiator needs to mount to the body of the vehicle. Now you're going to have some of those metal clips on here. It's common for them to be stretched a little bit and fall out of position. If that's the case, I like to just line it up and then I'm going to press in on the center and try to lock it back in position. Okay friends, now it's time to install our brand new radiator. Let's be very careful as we slide the new radiator into position. You want to be extremely careful not to damage any of the cooling fins. Even peening over a small amount of these could restrict the amount of airflow coming through and of course damage the cooling system. While we're sliding this down, let's pay attention along each side of the radiator. You're going to find that you have a mounting nub that protrudes out, and on the frame of the vehicle, you're going to have an area where it needs to mount into. Go ahead and slide the radiator down and into position. After that, we'll put in both of our 10mm headed mounting bolts. Now that we have the radiator slid down into position, we want to leave it so it's loose. We'll continue on by putting on our air dam here. You want to make sure that each of these little tabs line up with their corresponding holes in the radiator and then gently press it in. Now we can take the radiator and slide it in position up against the body of the vehicle. We'll start in both of our mounting bolts. If it doesn't seem like it wants to line up, just try pressing down on the radiator. Typically, it's just stuck on the bottom mounting point. Start them both in by hand. Now we can snug them up. And make sure they're tight. Do the same on the other side. Now we can slide our lines into the radiator. I'm just going to try to start this in by hand so I'm sure that I'm not going to cross thread it in any way. Once it's started, you can go ahead and snug it up with a wrench. We'll use our 16 millimeter. So right there, it felt as though it bottomed out. I'm just going to make sure that I make it nice and tight. Now we can do the same to the upper line. It's bottomed out. Make sure it's nice and tight. Now let's run our overflow hose over here, connect that onto the radiator. And then we'll tuck it down into this position here. Now we can re-secure our fan shroud. Make sure that's tight. Do the same on the other side. Now let's make our way right up here to the petcock. We're going to make sure that it's nice and tight. There we are. Let's make our way to this bracket right here. We're going to take that little piton and put it right on through the radiator. We'll press it through and make sure it's latched in. Oh yeah, heard a nice click there. Give it a little wiggle. You want to make sure that's secure so these cannot wiggle around on you. Let's move along to the lower radiator hose. We'll connect that to the bottom of the radiator. Squeeze the clamp, put it in its original position. Grab that hose, give it a nice tug, make sure it's completely secured to the radiator. Now we can put our lower shield back in place. Make sure you slide your lines into the proper position. Now as we move along each side, we're going to line up our push clips with the corresponding hole. Go ahead and press it up in there. The same on this side real quick. Once it's up there, you can continue on with your 10 millimeter headed bolts for either side. We'll do the same to the other side here. Let's snug them up. We'll put in our 3 8 millimeter headed bolts for the forward aspect here. Let's get our air filter back in here. And now we can continue on with the air intake. Looking along this area, you can find that you have 3 mounting ears. Looking at the lower box, you're going to find the 3 holes that it fits into. Just go ahead and slide it right in. Now I'm going to swing this down. I'm not going to worry about the clips yet. I'm going to move right up to where this connects into the throttle body. Let's take this and slide it in position. Make sure it's bottomed out as far onto the throttle body as possible. Let's tighten this clamp. Grab that hose, try to pull it off of the throttle body. Now let's slide this into proper position as well. Now we're going to move along to our wiring. We'll take this wiring and we're going to slide it into its mounting position. Reconnect in your mass airflow sensor. Listen for a click. There it is. I'm going to give this a tug. Now let's reach down and re-lock in our locking tabs. Just going to pull this up and then swing it down to lock it. Do the same to the other. Grab that box, make sure it's secure as well. Now we can put our cover on top of the engine. Remember, you have 3 mounting holes with 3 mounting bolts, and those need to line up with the intake in the proper position. Now for me, I'm just going to continue by using a funnel. I have an adapter here that screws right on and it's nice and tight. I don't have to worry about coolant flowing out of the radiator as I try to fill this. I'll slide the funnel right on here and now I'm going to go ahead and top off the coolant. Once I get some coolant inside this, we're going to go ahead and run the vehicle for a little while. You're going to find the coolant makes its way down and air makes its way up. Keep filling this up, making sure that the coolant does not run dry in the funnel. It's important to make sure that you use the proper manufacturer specified coolant. You also want to make sure that it's either pre-mixed 50-50 or you mix the concentrate with distilled water. Let's make our way right along the passenger side of the engine and we're going to be looking for the transmission dipstick. It's yellow. Go ahead and grab onto it and lift it up and out of here. As I'm lifting it up, I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick wipe. Now you're going to want to have the vehicle running and have it at running temperature. We'll check the fluid. If it looks like it's low, go ahead and top it off up to the top of the hatch lines with the manufacturer specified fluid. Okay friends, we got our radiator installed in the vehicle. At this point, you're going to want to make sure that you have that coolant funnel topped off. Go ahead and hop inside the passenger compartment. Start up the vehicle, put the heat in the hot position and the blower motor on high. After that, you're going to want to make your way out here and make sure that the coolant funnel stays full. We're trying to burp out all the air. Once you see that there's no more air coming out of the funnel and you hop inside the passenger compartment and you can feel plenty of heat coming from the vents, typically you're good to go. Go ahead and remove that funnel, put on your radiator cap, and then of course make your way over to the coolant reservoir. At the coolant reservoir, you want to double check the level. Make sure it's up to the full line. It doesn't need to be up to the top of the container itself, just up to the full line. Close it up, close the hood, take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.